For 11 months, the ring sat in a locked glass case in a pawnshop in Erie, Pennsylvania, second row, third from the left, tagged at $495. Hundreds of people looked at it. Every one of them saw the same thing. A used man's wedding band, 14 karat, somewhere on the underside. Owen Marsh saw the 4 words engraved inside it. Because he was the one who had written the ticket, on a Tuesday in October, across a counter, for a woman in a good coat, who did not cry and did not explain, and who said she would be back in 60 days. She never came back. Owen was 34 years old, he had a 6-year-old son and $911 in the world, and he was about to do something that made sense to absolutely nobody. If you have ever let go of something you could not afford to lose, tap the like button and tell me what it was. I'd like to know I'm not the only one. The pawnshop was called Lakeshore Loan and Trade, and it sat between a wig shop and a place that cashed checks, 4 blocks up from the water. And Owen Marsh had been behind the counter there for 2 years and 4 months. Before that, he had been an appraiser. 9 years with Corliss and Bain, Estates and Industrial, which meant he spent his 20s walking through dead men's houses and shut down factories with a flashlight and a clipboard, putting numbers on things. He was good at it in a way that had never once impressed anybody at a party. He could walk into a warehouse of what everyone had agreed was junk and find the one pallet that paid for the whole job. He had a memory for the underside of things. Maker's marks, patent stamps, the shape of a dovetail, the tiny cast letters on the bottom of a casting that told you which foundry poured it, and roughly when. Corliss and Bain went under in a way that made the papers. Not because of him. Ellis Bain had been running bids through a shell buyer for 6 years, and Owen had been the one who noticed. And had said so, first to Bain and then, when that went the way it went, to a lawyer. He was right. It cost him everything anyway. That is a thing that is true more often than people like to say out loud. By the time the file closed, the firm was gone. The industry in 3 states knew his name in the sentence he was at Corliss, and Owen Marsh was 32, unemployed and being left. Danielle didn't leave over the money. He wanted to be fair about that, even in his own head, even at 2 in the morning. She left because she had married a man with a future and had found herself in a rented half-house with a toddler and a man who sat in the dark. And she was honest enough to say it plainly instead of making him guess. She signed the papers in April. She sent a card at Christmas for 2 years, and then she didn't. Theo was 2 when she went. He was 6 now. He had a cowlick that could not be fixed, and a way of asking questions in threes. The pawnshop job paid $14 an hour, and Sal Mirek, who owned it, was a decent man in a business that does not require it. Sal had hired him for exactly one reason. He'd handed Owen a box of costume jewelry and a loop, and watched him sort $400 of gold out of it in 11 minutes. "You're overqualified," Sal had said. "I'm available," Owen said. That's the same word said sadder. He worked the counter Tuesdays through Saturdays. He learned things nobody teaches you. He learned that people bring in the wedding rings last. After the television, after the tools, after the guitar. He learned that men lie about why and women don't. He learned to never ever say "I'm sorry" over the counter, because the person on the other side of it is usually spent all morning building something that will fall down if you touch it. And he learned that everyone who says "I'll be back for it" means it. About 1 in 11 ever came. She came in on a Tuesday in October at 4 in the afternoon. Owen would think about the details for a long time afterward, and the detail he kept coming back to was the coat. It was a good coat. Charcoal, wool, cut well, 4 or 5 years old, and beautifully kept. And the cuff was worn shiny on the right side, where she'd been resting it on a desk for a decade. That's what told him. A woman who buys a coat like that buys another one in year 3. This one had been made to last past its life. She was somewhere in her late 30s. Dark blonde, pulled back. No makeup he could see. She put a man's wedding band on the counter and slid it across with 2 fingers and said, "What can you do?" He picked it up. 14 karat, wide band, 6 millimeters, real wear on the palm side, which meant a working man had worn it, or a man who used his hands and didn't take it off. Not a fashionable ring. Not new. He turned it to the light and read the inside. 4 words. He put it down. Loan or sale? Loan, she said, fast, $3.40. That's not what it's worth. No, ma'am, Owen said. It's what it weighs. Worth's a different number, and I don't get to write that one on the ticket. Something moved across her face and was gone. How long do I have? 90 days on the ticket. Sal extends 30 if you come in and ask. And if you can't come in, call, and he'll do it over the phone. I'll be back inside 60. All right. She said it like a woman putting a bolt through a hole. Not hope. A schedule. She filled out the slip in small square handwriting, took $340, folded it once, put it in an inside pocket, and left. And the door chime did its thing, and that was the entire transaction. And it took 11 minutes. He sat with the ring in his palm for a second before he bagged and tagged it. Then he read the 4 words again. Back by 6. Owen Marsh had sold his own wedding ring 9 months earlier. Not at Sal's. 2 towns over, at a place where nobody knew him, for $190, and he'd bought a convertible car seat, and a case of formula, and a full tank of gas with it. And he had never told one living soul, including his mother, especially, a 4-year-old who would not have understood the question. It was a plain band. There was nothing engraved in it. That was actually the thing he thought about most, that when it went into the case there had been nothing inside it at all to say who it had belonged to or what anybody had promised. So he knew, standing there on a Tuesday in October with $340 gone out of the drawer, exactly what he was holding and exactly what the odds were. 90 days went by. The 30-day extension went by. Nobody called. On day 121, the ring came out of the hold shelf and went into the case at $4.95, and Owen put it in the second row. Third from the left, which was the worst spot in the case. Low, back, behind the chains, where the light didn't reach. He told himself he wasn't doing that on purpose. He did it again in March when Sal reorganized, and by then he'd stopped pretending. He found out who she was in June, and it was an accident, and it was a newspaper. A copy of the Erie paper on the break room table, folded to the business page, and a photograph of a woman in a hard hat at a ribbon cutting for a hospital laundry expansion. 2 years old, the caption said, reprinted alongside a new article about hospital contracts going out of the region. Corinne Ashby, chief executive of Ashby Linen and Laundry. He knew the coat before he knew the face. The article said Ashby Linen and Laundry had been washing for northwestern Pennsylvania since 1961, that it had 140 employees, and that it had lost its largest hospital contract to a national competitor 11 months back. It said the founder's grandson, Nathaniel Ashby, had died 2 years ago at 41. It said his widow had taken over as chief executive. It said she had declined to comment. Owen stood in a break room with a sandwich in one hand for a long time. Then he did the arithmetic, which he was very, very good at, and the arithmetic went like this. 140 people. Payroll every other Friday. October is when hospital contracts renew. $340 is not a bill, and it is not rent. $340 is what you get when you have already sold the things that are worth something and you are down to the last thing, and you are $340 short of a number that has to be exactly right on Friday. She hadn't pawned her husband's ring because she was in trouble. She'd pawned it because it was Thursday. He went to Sal that night. The band in the case. Second row. The one you keep hiding. That's the one. Sal looked at him over his glasses. $4.95. I know what it is. I wrote the ticket. Then you know I've got $340 in it and a year of it sitting there not moving. I'll pay the $4.95, Owen said. I want to pay the whole tag. I don't want a favor on it. I'll do it out of my check, $80 a month, and I'll sign whatever you want. And Sal, I need you to pull it out of the case tonight and put my name on it. Sal Merrick took his glasses off. Owen, son, he said it kindly. You've got a boy in school shoes with the toes going. I know. Then what in God's name are you doing? Owen thought about how to say it. There were 4 words in it, he said. It took him 4 months and 11 days. He paid $80 a month, and then in December, when the shop was busy, he picked up Sundays and paid $140, and in February the truck's water pump went, and he paid nothing at all, and Sal said nothing at all about it. He got Theo's shoes in January from a church rummage sale. Good ones, barely worn. And Theo wore them proudly because they had a stripe. He never told his mother. Peg Marsh had opinions about her son's decisions, and she gave them freely, and this one would have taken the roof off the house. On a Thursday in June, Sal handed him a small paper envelope with the ring in it and the receipt stapled to the flap and said, "Paid in full." And then, because he was who he was, "You need the afternoon? I'll go Saturday." "Go today," Sal said. "You've been going today for 11 months. The lobby of Ashby Linen and Laundry was not what he expected. He'd expected a tired little office. What he got was a 2-story brick front on Ivy Street with a wall of black and white photographs going back to 1961 and a floor you could see your reflection in, and behind glass. The sound of the plant, a deep continuous roar you felt in your feet, tunnel washers and steam, and the flatwork ironers running. 40 or 50 people were in that lobby. He had walked into the middle of something. There were folding chairs set out, and every one of them was full, and there were people standing along the walls in blue work shirts with their arms crossed. And a woman at the front was talking, and a man in a suit at the side was holding a folder, and Owen understood in about 4 seconds that he had walked into an all-hands meeting on the worst possible morning. He tried to back out. The door had already shut behind him, and it was one of those heavy ones, and the whole back row turned. The woman at the front stopped talking. She was in the coat. Same one. Shiny cuff. "Can I help you?" Corinne Ashby said, in the voice of a woman who had been standing up in front of 140 people for 20 minutes saying things she did not want to say. Owen stood there in a pawnshop polo shirt with a paper envelope in his hand. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'll come back. You're already in the room." It isn't business, ma'am." "Nothing today is business," she said. "Say what you came to say." So he crossed 40 feet of that lobby floor with every person in the building watching him, and he stopped a respectful distance away, and he put the envelope on the edge of the table in front of her. "You came into Lakeshore Loan and Trade on the 12th of October, last year," Owen said. "I wrote your ticket." The lobby went absolutely silent. He watched her face come apart in stages, and it was the worst thing he had ever seen, and he would have given a year of his life to have done it in a hallway. "It went to the case in February," he said quietly. "I've been buying it off my boss since then. It's paid. Nobody's owed anything on it, and there's no favor in it, and I'm not going to be around after today. So it isn't a thing that comes with anything attached." He stepped back. "I just didn't want it in a case," he said. Corinne Ashby opened the envelope with both hands. She looked at the ring in her palm. And a woman who, Owen would learn later, from 11 different people, none of whom could agree on much else, had not been seen to cry at her husband's funeral, had not cried when the hospital contract went, had not cried in front of a soul in 26 months, stood in the lobby of her grandfather-in-law's company in front of everybody she was responsible for, and made a sound that a 61-year-old woman named Ruthann Pike said later she would hear for the rest of her life. Somebody's chair went over. Ruthann got to her first, then Desmond from the plant floor. Then it was half the room, and Owen Marsh was outside of it, standing back with his hands at his sides. And he turned to go, and he had gotten as far as the door when a voice behind him cracked all the way through, but level, because she was already rebuilding it word by word, said, "Don't you leave this building." She did not thank him. That was the first thing he learned about Corinne Ashby, and he learned it in a glass-walled office over the plant floor 40 minutes later, with the roar coming up through the floor and the ring in a closed fist on the desk between them. "You humiliated me in my own lobby," she said. Owen sat very still. "Yes, ma'am, I did." You had 11 months to find me, and you chose the one morning I'm standing in front of 140 people telling them there's no third quarter bonus. I didn't know about the meeting. You didn't ask, either. You didn't call. You didn't come to the side door and ask a receptionist to get me. Her voice was flat and hard and completely under control, and her eyes were still red, which made the control worse to watch. You walked into a room full of my people, and you handed me my husband's wedding ring in front of every single one of them, and now every one of them knows what I did with it. Yes, say something else. There isn't anything else, Owen said. You're right. I did it wrong. I've been carrying it around for 4 months trying to figure out how to do it right, and there wasn't a right way, and this morning my boss told me to stop waiting. And I stopped waiting. And I did it the way a man does a thing he's scared of, which is badly and fast. She looked at him. What do you want? Nothing. Everybody wants something. I know, Owen said. That's the whole business I'm in. 2 years I've been standing behind a counter watching people want something. I know exactly what it looks like. He put his hands on his knees. I'm telling you I don't, and you have no reason on earth to believe me, and I'd rather you didn't, honestly, because a woman in your position shouldn't. Corinne Ashby was quiet for a moment. Then she opened her hand and looked at the ring in it. $495. It's paid. That's not what I asked. $495. Off my check, $80 a month, since February. You make $14 an hour. He didn't answer that. You have a child, she said. Ruthann asked the girl at the desk to look at your paperwork while you were in the hall, which is illegal, and which I'm telling you because I'd rather you heard it from me. You have a boy, 6, and you list your mother's address. That's right, you spent $495 on a stranger. I spent it on a ring, Owen said. Why? And here it was. And he had known it was coming from the moment she said, "Don't you leave this building," and he had decided in the hallway that he was going to tell her exactly one true thing and no more. Because the rest of it was his. Because I read the inside of it, he said. Corinne closed her hand. You will not repeat those words, she said. Not to my employees, not to my brother-in-law, not to a bank, not to anybody, for as long as you live. No, ma'am. Say it. I'll never repeat it. She put the ring in her desk drawer and shut it, and Owen thought that was the end, and stood up. Sit down, said Corinne Ashby. I have a job I need done, and I can't afford anybody I'd normally hire, and you just told me you were an appraiser at Corliss & Bain, which means either you're the man who blew the whistle on Ellis Bain, or you're one of the ones who helped him, and I intend to find out which by Friday. Owen sat down. How do you know that name? Because Cardinal Asset Partners sent me a valuation of this company 11 days ago, she said. And I want somebody who does that for a living to tell me whether it's a number or a knife. The job was 6 weeks, and it paid $900 a week, and Owen very nearly turned it down. He didn't, because $900 a week was more money than he had made in any week of his life since Corliss went down, and because Theo's teacher had sent home a note about a field trip that cost $41. And because Owen Marsh had learned the hard way that a man who turns down money for the shape of a thing is usually doing it so he can feel clean later. His title was Interim Asset Manager. His actual instruction, given standing in 11 words, was, walk this entire company and tell me what it is worth. 140 employees. 4 buildings on 11 acres between Ivy Street and the Bay. 2 tunnel washers, 6 dryers the size of delivery vans, 4 flatwork ironers, a sewing room, a fleet of 19 trucks, a boiler house from 1968, a warehouse with 200,000 pieces of linen in it, and out behind Building 3, 11 acres of gravel and weeds where a rail spur used to run. He started at 6 in the morning and he did not sit down. The plant did not like him. That was fair. He came in behind a man in a suit from Cardinal who had walked the floor 2 weeks earlier with a tablet, taken 90 minutes, photographed things, and left, and whose report, Owen read it that first night, all 40 pages of it, described 140 people's livelihood as aging single-purpose assets and a declining regional service category. So when a stranger showed up with a clipboard, men stopped talking when he came around the corner. Desmond Croom ran the plant floor and had for 19 years, and he did not shake Owen's hand for 11 days. Ruth Ann Pike ran the number 2 flat work ironer and had for 39 years, and she said, on day 1, loudly, over the machine, without looking up, "You the fella from the pawn shop?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then you already know what everything's worth around here, don't you?" The women on that line laughed at him for about 4 seconds. Owen stood there and took it, and then he said, "How many sheets an hour does that thing run?" 900. "How many is it supposed to run?" Ruth Ann looked at him for the first time. 1,200. "Since when?" "Since about a year and a half," she said. "Since the chest pads went. I put it in writing twice." Owen wrote it down. That's what he did for 6 weeks. He wrote things down. He worked from 6 to 6, and then twice a week he stayed until 10, going through the file room, and Corinne Ashby was in that building every single one of those hours. And by the end of the second week, he understood what he was looking at. She was not running a company. She was holding one shut. She did payroll herself on a Thursday night because they'd let the payroll clerk go in April. She answered the customer line when it rang more than 4 times. She knew every single person on that floor. Not their names, that's nothing. Anybody can learn names. She knew that Ruth Ann's grandson had a hearing aid, and that the insurance had fought it. And she knew which 2 men on second shift were carpooling, because one of them had lost his license, and she had personally rearranged the shift schedule so it wouldn't be obvious to anyone else that she knew. She had not taken a paycheck in 9 months. He found that in the ledger in week 3 and put the ledger down and looked out the window for a while. She was also, to him personally, freezing cold for 4 straight weeks. She corrected him in front of Desmond. She sent his first written summary back with 3 lines through it and the words, "This is a story. Give me the number." She would not eat lunch in a room he was in. Twice she called him at 9 at night with a question that could have waited, and twice he answered on the first ring and gave her the answer, and she hung up both times without saying goodbye. Owen understood it more or less. He had handed her the worst moment of her adult life in front of everyone she was responsible for, and now she had to look at him every morning at 6. He didn't take it personally. He just kept turning up. That was in the end his entire strategy, and it was not a strategy, it was just how he was built. The hint came in week 3, and neither of them thought anything of it for a very long time. They were walking the north end because he wanted to see the property line, and it was raining. And Corinne had come out with him because Desmond was on a call, and she was in the coat. Behind building 3, the gravel gave out into weeds, and running through the weeds, half swallowed, was track. Owen stopped. "That's a rail spur." "That's 40 years of nothing," Corinne said. The Bessemer line ran up through here when Walt built the place. They pulled service in the 80s. He crouched down and scraped moss off a tie plate with his thumb. "Did they pull the easement?" "What?" "Service and easement are 2 different animals," he said. "One's a train, the other's a right on the deed." He stood up, wiping his hands. "Somebody's been paying tax on this, or somebody's been not paying tax on this, and either way it means something. It means we have weeds." Probably. Owen looked down the line of it, north, toward where the ground fell away, and you could see a gray strip of the lake between 2 buildings. "I'll pull the deed anyway." "You'll pull the deed for 11 acres of weeds." "I'll pull the deed for everything, ma'am," Owen said. "That's the job. The stuff in the middle of the room is never the thing." She looked at him with rain on her face. "Is that from Corliss?" "That's from a farmhouse in Medville," he said. 19. 2 days in a dead man's house. Everybody wanted the sideboard. Sideboard went for 800. He started walking again. There were 41 storm windows stacked in the barn, all original glass, all matched. 14,000. Corinne Ashby didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "What happened at Corliss and Bain?" "You already know. You said you'd find out by Friday, and that was 3 weeks ago. I want to hear you say it." Ellis Bain ran bids through a shell buyer for 6 years. Owen said. Chandeliers, mostly, estate stuff where the family didn't know. He'd buy it in through the back at a third and sell it in Cleveland at 4 times. I found it because a chandelier came up twice in 11 months in 2 catalogs, and I'd remembered the crack in the bobèche. And I told him, and he offered me $11,000 to have not noticed. And? Owen kept walking. And I had a wife and a 2-year-old, and $11,000 would have been 4 months, he said. I thought about it for a night and a half. I want to be honest about that, because everybody who tells this story says they didn't think about it, and everybody who says that is lying. They got to the fence. Then I went to a lawyer, he said. And 9 years of my working life turned into a sentence with the word coreless in it, and Danielle left in April, and I sold my wedding ring for $190 9 months after that. And now I'm here. He turned around. Corinne Ashby was standing in the rain with her hand over her mouth. Owen realized what he'd said about 11 seconds too late. That's not. He stopped. Ma'am. That wasn't a thing I meant to say. Mr. Marsh, I don't want it back. I'm not telling you that, so you'll, Owen, said Corinne, which was the first time. Shut up for a minute. He shut up. They stood at the fence in the rain, 2 people who had each sold a ring, and neither of them said one word about it. And after a while she turned back toward the buildings and said, "Get the deed." Before that there were 19 ordinary days, and they were the ones that mattered. Owen fixed the chest pads on the number 2 ironer in week 4. That is not what he was hired for, and he did it anyway, on a Saturday, with Desmond Croom standing over him the entire time saying it wouldn't work. The pads had been on back order from the manufacturer for 14 months because the manufacturer had been bought and had discontinued the line, which is the sort of sentence that ends a conversation in most companies. Owen spent 4 hours on the phone on a Friday night and found a shop in Rochester that had rebuilt the same series for a hotel laundry in 2009. And the shop's owner was 71 and semi-retired and had the pattern in a drawer. $1,100 in 9 days. Ruthann Pike's line went from 900 sheets an hour to 1,240 on a Tuesday morning. And Ruthann stood there with her hands on her hips and watched it run for a full minute, and then she went and got her reading glasses off the rail and put them on and watched it some more, like she wanted to be sure. 39 years, she said. Ma'am, 39 years I've run this line, and I have put 4 things in writing in that time, and this is the first one anybody ever did. She looked at him sideways. 2 in writing about the pads, 2 about the fan in the sewing room. What's wrong with the fan in the sewing room? Nothing, said Ruthann. There isn't one. There was one by Friday. It cost $61 and Owen bought it, and when Corinne found out she made him submit it, and he did, and she signed it, and neither of them made a thing of it. Desmond Croom shook his hand in week 5. That was all. He came up in the aisle and put his hand out and said Croom, like they'd never met. And Owen shook it and said Marsh. And that was the entire ceremony, and it meant more to him than the 900 a week. Meanwhile, he was counting. He counted every truck by VIN and pulled every maintenance record and found 4 of the 19 were worth more than the book said because they'd had engines put in. He counted the linen, actually counted it, by weight and by class, which nobody had done since 2014, and found 211,000 pieces where the book said 170. Because a hospital that closed in 2019 had never taken back its stock, and nobody had ever written it up. He priced the boiler house. He priced the water. He found that the plant sat on a 1963 industrial deep well permit that the state no longer issued, and that Ashby Linen and Laundry was drawing 400,000 gallons a day out of the ground for the cost of the electricity to lift it, while every competitor in 3 counties bought municipal water at a rate that had gone up 9 years running. He wrote that on a page by itself and looked at it for a while. That's not an asset, Corinne said when he showed her. That's a bill we don't have. Ma'am, that's the same thing. It's just wearing work clothes. Theo came to the plant once, in week 5, because Peg had a doctor's thing, and the school had a half day and there was nowhere else for him to be. Owen had sweated it for 2 days. He'd planned to keep the boy in the file room with a coloring book and a juice box, and have him invisible by 3 o'clock. Theo lasted about 11 minutes in the file room. By 10:30, he was in the sewing room, standing on a milk crate, being shown by a woman named Alma how the bar tack machine went, and by 11 he had a paper hat that somebody had made him out of a packing slip. And by noon, Ruth Ann Pike had him at the head of the number 2 ironer, where a 6-year-old had absolutely no business being, holding her hand, watching sheets come out flat, and steaming like something being born. Owen came around the corner and stopped dead. Corinne Ashby was standing at the rail above the floor, watching. "He's fine," she said before he could speak. Ruth Ann's had 4 of her own and 11 grandchildren. "He is the safest person in this building." "I'm sorry. I meant to keep him. Do you know how long it has been," Corinne said, "since there was a child in this plant?" Owen didn't. "Nate used to bring his nephew," she said, "every August. He'd put him on the counting table and let him run the tape." She watched the boy for a moment. "There's a photograph in the lobby. 1964. Walt Ashby holding a baby on the loading dock. That's Nate's father." "Do you have?" He stopped himself. Corinne finished it anyway, evenly, looking straight ahead. "No. We tried for 6 years. We were going to start again after the expansion." She took her hands off the rail. "The expansion was in April. He died in June. She went back inside." Owen stood there and did not follow her, which was the correct decision and cost him something. He nearly quit in week 4, and he has never told anybody that except one person. It was a Wednesday. She had sent back his summary of the fleet with a line through the first page and the words, "This is a story. Give me the number," which was fair, and then she had said, in front of Desmond and Lorna both, "Mr. Marsh appears to believe he was hired to write." Owen went out to the truck at lunch and sat in it. He had $160 in checking. He had a boy who had asked him that morning, in the way of 6-year-olds, whether they were going to live at Grandma's when he was 10, and Owen had said no. And Theo had said, "But where, though?" and Owen had not had an answer that was true. And he was 2 weeks into taking it from a woman who had every right to be furious with him and no right at all to say it in front of the plant manager. He got out his phone and pulled up Sal's number. Then he sat there for 11 minutes without pressing it. And what stopped him was not nobility, and it was not the money. It was that on his first morning, at 6:10, he had come in the side door and found her already at the number 4 ironer, with her jacket off and her sleeves up, elbow deep, in a jam with Desmond. And she had been there since 4:40, and when they got it clear, she went and washed her hands and put the jacket back on and went upstairs and ran a company for 12 more hours. A person who does that is not cruel. A person who does that is out of room. So he put the phone away and went back in and rewrote the fleet summary with the story taken out of it. And he handed it to her at 4 o'clock, and she read it and said, "Better." And that was all. And he went home and slept 9 hours. He told Ruth Ann Pike about the 11 minutes in the truck, 2 years later, at her retirement dinner, and Ruth Ann said, "Everybody sits in the truck once. It's the ones that come back in that get the dinner." The thaw, when it came sideways and had nothing to do with him. It was a Thursday night in week 5. Payroll night. He had stayed late to finish the boiler house valuation, and at 9 o'clock the power on the whole east side of the building dropped. Not the plant, just the offices, one leg of it, the way old buildings do. And he came up the stairs with a flashlight and found Corinne Ashby in the dark at her desk, with a hand-crank emergency radio on the blotter, cranking it, because it had a phone charger on the side. "Don't say anything," she said. "Wasn't going to. It's the west panel. It's been intermittent since April and it's $4,000. "It's not $4,000, Owen said. "It's a fuse holder with a heat-cracked ceramic and about 90 cents worth of parts, and I know that because I've been in that panel twice this week valuing it." She stopped cranking. "You can't work on a live panel." "No, ma'am. I'm going to kill the main, and I'm going to do it with Desmond standing there, and it's going to take 40 minutes. It took 55. When the lights came back up, Corinne Ashby was standing at the top of the stairs with 2 cups of coffee, and she handed him one and said, "Thursday nights are payroll. Nobody's ever up here on a Thursday." I noticed. "Do you want to know what I do?" "No, ma'am." She looked at him, I go down the list, she said anyway, 140 names, and I say them out loud. Because when it's a spreadsheet, it's a number, and I can move it, and I have moved it, and I have moved it in ways I'm not going to describe to you, and the only thing that stops me from moving it again is saying the names. Owen held his coffee. Ruth Ann Pike, Corinne said. Desmond Kroom. Alma Reyes. Ken Boyd. Marissa Boyd. That's his daughter-in-law. She's on second shift. She kept going. She got to 30 or so. Then she stopped and looked at the dark plant floor through the glass. I've never said that to anybody, she said. I won't repeat it. I know, she said. That's the irritating thing about you. Peter Ashby turned up in week 6. He came through the lobby without stopping at the desk, which told Owen who he was before anybody said it. 44, good jacket, the Ashby jaw. A man walking through a building he half owned and never worked in. You're the appraiser. I'm Owen Marsh, Peter Ashby. He didn't offer a hand. Nate's brother. 40% of what you're counting. He looked Owen up and down in a way that was not subtle. Corliss and Bain, right? Cardinal's people mentioned it. They would. Should I be worried about that? Depends, Owen said. If your interest is a clean number, no. If your interest is a fast one, then yes, probably. Peter Ashby smiled a little. You know what's actually going on here? I know what I've counted. What's going on here is that my sister-in-law is going to hold on to this place until it takes her house, Peter said. She signed a personal guarantee. Did you count that? It's not in a warehouse. It's on page 4 of the 2021 note, and it says that if this company goes down, Erie First Savings takes her house and her car and whatever's in her name, and Cardinal is offering a structure that makes that go away. And she will not sign it. And every week she doesn't sign it, the number gets worse. He said it fast and hot. And Owen watched him and saw underneath it something that surprised him. You're scared for her, Owen said. Peter Ashby's face closed like a drawer. I'm scared of my mother's house being on that note too, he said. Which it is. Count that. He left. Owen went and found the 2021 note that night and read page 4, and Peter Ashby was right about all of it, and it took Owen until 11 o'clock to understand that this was not going to be a fight between good people and a bad one. It was going to be a fight about what a thing is worth. Between 4 people who each had a different number in their head, and only one of them was lying. And 9 days later, Hollis Grieve came to Erie. Hollis Grieve did not look like a predator, which is the first thing worth knowing about him, and the second is that he was not one. He was something worse and more ordinary. He was a man who had found a legal machine that worked and had decided a long time ago to stop asking himself questions about it. He was 50, tall, soft-spoken, in a gray suit with no tie, and he came into the conference room at Ashby Linen and Laundry on a Tuesday morning with 2 associates and a bound presentation and shook everybody's hand, including Owen's. You're Marsh. I am. I read your inventory. Grieve said it without any edge at all. It's the best piece of work anybody's done on this company in 15 years. I mean that. Are you looking for something after this? Because I'd take a call. I'm not. Take my card anyway. People say that in June. He was there for 90 minutes, and he was reasonable for every one of them. Cardinal Asset Partners had bought the Ashby note from Erie First Savings in March at 71 cents on the dollar. That was the whole thing. Everything else was arithmetic. The note had a fixed charge coverage covenant in it that Ashby had broken in the 4th quarter and again in the 1st, which triggered a default that the old bank had been quietly waiving because Ken Ottaway had known Walt Ashby. Cardinal did not know Walt Ashby. Cardinal had sent a notice of default in April, offered forbearance through the end of September, and put a proposal on the table. Cardinal converts the note to a controlling equity position. Corinne Ashby stays on as a paid consultant for 18 months. The personal guarantees are released, and the family walks away whole. Whole, Corinne said. Released, said Grieve. Your guarantee and Mrs. Ashby's on the Cochran Street property. And Peter's. Gone, in a market where I don't have to do that. And in 18 months? In 18 months, I'd expect the business to be consolidated into a regional platform, Greaves said. And I'm not going to insult you by pretending the headcount stays at 140. Because it doesn't. And if I told you it did, you'd know I was lying and you'd stop listening to the true parts. That was the moment Owen understood what they were up against, and started, quietly, to be afraid. Because a liar you can beat. A man who tells you the truth about the part that hurts is a man who has done this 11 times and knows exactly which sentence buys him the room. How many people? Corinne said. 40 to 50 stay through the transition. Long term, in this footprint, I'd guess 60. 60, you asked. And the property? For the first time in 90 minutes, Hollis Greaves' rhythm changed. It was nothing. It was a quarter of a second, a small pause where there had not been one before. The real estate follows the business, he said. Standard. Owen wrote 4 words on his pad and turned it over. The forbearance ran to September 30th. The creditors' meeting, Cardinal Erie First's remaining participation, 2 trade creditors and the pension trustee, was set for the 22nd. 29 days. Peter Ashby wanted her to sign it. He said so in the parking lot, loudly, and Owen heard the whole thing through an open window in the file room. Mom's house, Corinne. I know. You know. You know. You knew last April and you knew in June, and here we are, Peter. He would have signed it. That was the one that landed. Owen heard it land. You know he would. Nate would have signed it in an hour and gone home and slept. Nate would not have signed it, Corinne said. How would you know? You didn't let him have a single Sunday off in 9 years, and then he stopped himself. There was a silence in that parking lot that went on for a long time. Say the rest of it, Corinne said. I didn't mean that. Say it, Peter. But he didn't. He got in his car and drove away, and Owen sat in the file room with a deed book open in front of him and did not move for a while. Because a man who has been through a divorce knows exactly what an unfinished sentence sounds like. Cardinal did not go away and wait for September. That is not how it works, and Owen had read enough of those files at Corliss to know what was coming before it came. It came as paper. A field exam notice on the second day, which meant 2 people from Pittsburgh in the conference room for a week, going through inventory and receivables line by line, at the company's expense, which the note allowed. $4,000. A notice to Ashby's insurance carrier, copied to the company, confirming Cardinal's status as lost payee. Standard, also, when the carrier's underwriter read it, enough to trigger a review that put the fleet policy in question for 11 days. And then, on the 9th day, letters to the 22 largest customers. Nothing improper. A collateral verification request. Confirm your outstanding balance with Ashby Linen and Laundry as of the date below. Signed by an associate, on Cardinal letterhead, mailed to accounts payable departments all over northwestern Pennsylvania. 9 of them called Corinne within 48 hours to ask if the company was going under. 4 of them started paying at 45 days instead of 30. That's the whole play, Owen said at 11 at night, in the glass office. He doesn't need to win. He needs September 30th to arrive with you 11 days short on cash, and every one of those letters buys him 2 days. Then we go to the customers first. Yes, ma'am. All of them. Not a letter. In person, or on the phone with me. Not Lorna. That's 4 days of your time you don't have. Then it's 4 days, Corinne said, and did it, and got 3 of the 4 back to 30 days, and lost 1 entirely. A nursing home group in Meadville that went to the Columbus competitor and did not return her calls, and that one hurt for a long time, because she had known the owner's mother. Owen kept counting through all of it. He counted the boiler house down to the trap valves. He counted the sewing room. He sat in the file room on a folding chair for 11 hours over 2 nights and pulled every lease, every easement, every recorded instrument going back to 1961, and that is where the deed came from. In a book with a cracked spine that had been in a drawer under a dead adding machine. And in the middle of it, on the 11th day, he signed a lease. He had not planned to. He had planned to stay at Peg's until spring, which is what he had told himself since April, and what Peg had told him was fine, and what had been fine right up until the Tuesday Theo asked whether they'd live at Grandma's when he was 10. $900 a week for 6 weeks was $5,400. The place on Wallace was $750 a month. First, last, and deposit was $2,250. Owen did the arithmetic 4 times over 2 nights, and every single time it came out saying don't. And on the 4th time he understood that the arithmetic was being done by a man who had been afraid for 4 years, and had gotten so good at being afraid that he'd started calling it math. He signed it on a Thursday. The girl at the front desk notarized it and made a fuss. He told Theo in the truck, "Is there a yard? There's a yard. Is there a tree in the yard? There's a tree." Theo thought about this for the entire length of Peach Street. "Is Grandma coming?" "Grandma's staying at her house. We'll see her all the time. It's 11 minutes. "Okay," Theo said. And then, 4 blocks later to the window, not to his father. "Is it ours? Or is it ours till?" Owen had to pull over. He had not known, genuinely had not known, in the way you don't know things about your own child until they hand them to you, that a 6-year-old had been carrying around a category called ours till. "It's ours till at least next summer," he said, because he had made himself a rule about lying to the boy. "That's what the paper says. And then we sign another paper and it's ours longer, and that's how it works for everybody, Bud. Grandma's got a paper too." "Does the lady have a paper?" "What lady?" "The one you work for. The one you're always thinking about at dinner." Owen sat at the wheel of a parked truck on Peach Street for a second. "Yeah," he said. "She's got a paper. Hers is the biggest one." She told him 9 nights later, at 11:40, in the office over the plant, and she told it flat. She started in the middle, the way people do when they have said a thing to themselves 10,000 times and have worn a path into it. She said Nate had chest pain on a Thursday in May. Not bad. Pressure, he called it. He was 41 and he ran 6 miles on Saturdays, and his father was alive at 73. She said they had the hospital system's bid presentation on the 9th of June, and it was 3 years of work, and it was the entire future of the company. And he was the one who had to give it, because he was the one they trusted, because he was the Ashby, because he'd been shaking those men's hands since he was 19. She said the cardiologist had an opening on the 28th of May, and Nate had said he'd rather not have a stress test in the middle of the bid prep, and she had agreed with him, and they had moved it to the 16th of June, 1 week after. She said she did not fight him about it. She said that was the part. She said she had fought that man about the price of detergent and the color of the trucks, and she did not fight him about this, because they were going to win the bid, and because there was always one more Sunday. She said he died on the 7th of June in the boiler house at 4 in the afternoon, 2 days before the presentation, and Desmond Kroom found him, and Desmond did CPR for 9 minutes on a concrete floor and broke 3 of his ribs doing it, and Desmond still could not look at the boiler house door without stopping. She said she gave the presentation on the 9th of June anyway. She said she stood up in a hospital system boardroom 8 hours after her husband died and gave his presentation because 140 people needed the contract, and they won it, and everyone told her it was extraordinary. She said they lost it 11 months later anyway to a company out of Columbus with a lower price and a national footprint. She said, so it was for nothing. She said the ring came off her chain in October because payroll was $3,080 short on a Thursday, and she had already sold the truck and the second car and her mother's brooch, and there was nothing else left in the house that a pawnshop would take. And she got $340 for it, and she stood in the parking lot afterward and made 4 more phone calls and got the rest. And then she said the last part, which was the part he had not known was coming. She said she never went back for it on purpose. She said the 60 days came and went, and she had the money by January. She had the $495 by January. She could have had it any time, and she did not go. Because somewhere in those weeks she had made a decision. And the decision was that a woman who schedules her husband's heart around a sales presentation does not get to wear his wedding ring. She said she had decided that leaving it in a case was the honest thing. Then she stopped. The plant ran underneath them. A dryer buzzed somewhere far off and somebody killed it. Owen Marsh sat there with his hands on his knees and did not say it wasn't your fault. And he wanted to say it the way you want water. He didn't say it because he had heard it 400 times in 2 years. From his mother, from a counselor at the church, from Sal Myrick, about Danielle, about Corliss, about the ring in the case 2 towns over, and every single time somebody said it, what he heard underneath was, "Please stop talking about this now." So instead he said, "Can I tell you what I think the 4 words are for?" Corinne looked up. "You said you'd never repeat them." "I'm not going to repeat them," Owen said. "I'm going to tell you what a man means when he engraves that." He turned his hands over. "I've had 4,000 rings across a counter," he said. "People engrave dates. They engrave initials. They engrave scripture, and they engrave their song. You know what almost nobody engraves? A promise about a Tuesday." He shook his head slowly. "That's not a wedding ring line. That's a line from a kitchen. That's a thing he said so many times it stopped being a lie and started being a joke, and one of you decided it was the truest thing either of you had." Corinne's hands were flat on the desk. "He was never back by 6, she said. "Not one time in 11 years. No, ma'am. I don't imagine he was. He was always going to be there Sunday. I know. And then, I know." She put her head down for a second, not crying, just down. "You didn't schedule his heart," Owen said. "You had a man who wouldn't take a Sunday off in 9 years, and you're taking the blame for the 1 week you agreed with him. Because taking the blame is the only thing left in the building you can still lift." That was the closest he came, in 6 weeks, to telling her. She sat back. "Get out of my office," she said, entirely without heat. "Yes, ma'am." At the door she said, "Owen, ma'am. The deed. It came in Tuesday," Owen said. "I've been trying to find the right night to show you, and this was not it. Show me tomorrow." "Yes, ma'am." He never got to show her, because at 8:15 the next morning, everything came apart. The Erie paper ran it on a Wednesday, on the business page, under a headline that somebody had worked on. Ashby laundry valuation drawn up by ex-Corliss appraiser. It was 400 words, and it was technically accurate in every line, which is the thing about that kind of story. It said that Ashby Linen and Laundry, in default on a $5.4 million note, had engaged as its asset valuation consultant a former employee of Corliss and Bain, the Meadville auction house dissolved in a bid-rigging scandal. It said that the consultant, Owen Marsh, 34, was most recently employed at a Peach Street pawnbroker. It said Cardinal Asset Partners had filed a supplemental disclosure with the creditors' committee raising concerns about the independence of the debtor's valuation. It did not say that Owen was the whistleblower. It did not say it the other way. Either, it just laid the 2 facts down next to each other on a table and walked away and let 100,000 people do what people do. Nobody had lied. That was the elegance of it. Hollis Grieve had not needed to lie a single time. And in the 11th paragraph, at the bottom, was the other one. The company has been the subject of local speculation since an incident in June in which Ashby, 38, was presented with a wedding ring belonging to her late husband by a pawnshop employee in front of assembled staff. Reached by phone, Ashby declined to comment. Owen read that paragraph standing in the break room at 8:15 in the morning with a cup of coffee going cold in his hand, and he understood 2 things at once. Somebody in that lobby had talked. 140 people had been in that room, and one of them had told somebody at a bar, and that person had told somebody. And it had rolled downhill for 9 weeks the way those things do. And it made him look like a plant. That was the genius of the 11th paragraph. Read it cold, with the headline above it, and what you had was a man from a discredited appraisal firm who had walked into a distressed company with a sentimental gift, obtained a $900 a week engagement, and produced a valuation the creditors were now being asked to trust. He put the coffee down. His hands were not steady. Ken Ottaway at Erie First called at 9:40 and pulled the bank's support for the September extension. The Pension Trustees Council emailed at 11 and asked in 3 careful paragraphs whether the debtor intended to commission an independent valuation from a firm without prior enforcement history. At noon, Peter Ashby came through the lobby without stopping at the desk. Owen heard it from the file room and did not hide, which was a decision he made in about a second and a half. And he came out and stood in the hallway outside the glass office while it happened, because he had decided a long time ago that he was not going to be a man who let a woman take something alone that had his name on it. Peter did not shout at first. "Did you know?" "I knew he was at Corliss," Corinne said. "I knew it the first week. He told me himself before I could look it up, and then I looked it up anyway, and he's the one who reported it. That's a matter of public record, and it took me 11 minutes. That's not what the paper says. The paper doesn't say anything. That's the point of it." "Corinne," Peter had a copy of it folded in his hand, and he was gripping it. "Mom read paragraph 11 this morning. My mother, sitting at her kitchen table on Cochrane Street with her cereal, reading that her son's wedding ring was in a pawnshop case for 11 months, and a stranger bought it out. Do you understand what that did to her?" "Yes, do you?" "Peter, I am the person who put it there. And you never told her." "No, you never told me." "No. Why?" And Corinne Ashby, who had not raised her voice at anybody in that building in 26 months, said, "Because you'd have paid it, and I'd have had to take it. And then that would have been one more thing." Peter stood there. "Get rid of him," he said. "No, Corinne, the trustee is asking for a second valuation. That's 4 weeks and $30,000 we don't have 29 days to spend. And the only reason they're asking is his name on the cover page. His name on the cover page is the only reason we have a valuation at all. Then take his name off it." "That is fraud, Peter," she said. "That is the actual thing. That's what Ellis Bain did. And I'm not going to do it in this building, and if that's the price, then I will pay the price. And if that costs you Cochrane Street, I will find a way to make you whole out of whatever is left of me, and I'll put it in writing today." Peter Ashby looked at his brother's wife for a long moment. "He's already cost you everything you had left," he said quietly, "and he did it by being kind. You want to think about that." Then he saw Owen in the hallway. He didn't say anything. He walked past him. That was worse. Owen went in and closed the door. "I'm resigning," he said. "Effective this morning. You will not." "Ma'am, do not," Corinne said. "Do the noble thing at me. I have had it done at me twice this week. It isn't noble." He set the folder down on her desk. "It's arithmetic, and you know it is, and you'd have done the same math by 4 o'clock. The valuation is the only weapon we've got, and it's got my thumbprint on it. And as long as I'm on the engagement, the committee gets to talk about me instead of about the number. So I come off, and the number stands on its own, and Grieve loses the only thing he actually bought this week. That valuation took you 6 weeks. It'll still be true when I'm gone." Corinne Ashby put both hands flat on the desk. "You have a lease," she said. Owen didn't answer. "Don't do that. Don't go quiet on me. You signed a lease. The girl at the desk notarized something for you 3 weeks ago, and she came and told me because she was happy about it." "It's a 2-bedroom on Wallace," Owen said. "It's got a yard. 12 months?" 12 months. First, last, and a deposit. When does it start?" "It started Tuesday." She closed her eyes. "Ma'am," Owen said, "I've had worse Junes. I had one 4 years ago that this doesn't come near. That is not a comfort." "No," he agreed. "But it's true, and I've found true holds up better than comfort." He put his badge on the desk and the truck keys for the plant truck and the folder, the whole valuation, 400 pages, 6 weeks. Squared up. The way you leave a thing when you want it to be findable. At the door he stopped. "The deed's in there," he said. "Tab 41, at the back, behind the fleet. I flagged it yesterday, and I was going to walk you through it, and now I'm not going to be able to. So read tab 41, and then read the 1963 well permit 2 tabs behind it. and then get somebody who isn't me to tell you what those two pieces of paper are worth sitting next to each other. Owen, they're not weeds, he said. Then he walked out through the lobby, past 60 years of black and white photographs and a floor you could see your reflection in, and Ruth Ann Pike came off her line without permission and hugged him in front of everybody. And Desmond Croom shook his hand at the door and said, "Croom, again," like a password. And Owen got in his truck. He sat there for a minute. Then he drove to his mother's house and picked up his son, and they went to the new place on Wallace Street with the yard, and Theo ran the whole perimeter of it 4 times because it was his, and Owen sat on the back step and watched him do it. 6 weeks of work, 11 months of $80, a 12-month lease, and 140 people 22 days from a creditor's meeting he was not going to be in the room for. "Dad," Theo said, hanging off the fence. Dad, is this our whole yard or is it half?" "It's the whole thing. Even the tree?" "Even the tree." Theo considered the tree with great seriousness. "Okay," he said, "but you look sad about the tree." She came to Wallace Street at 10 o'clock that night with a cardboard box on the passenger seat, and Owen opened the door in a T-shirt with a dish towel over his shoulder and said, "Ma'am," and Corinne Ashby said, "Tab 41, and walked past him into the house. The house had 4 pieces of furniture in it. A couch from Peg's basement, a kitchen table with 2 chairs, a bed, and a small bed. There were 11 cardboard boxes stacked along the wall and a lamp with no shade. She put the folder on the table and stopped, and looked around, and Owen watched her do the thing that people with money do in houses like that, which is decide very quickly not to say anything about it. "He's asleep," Owen said. "I won't be loud. You can be loud. That kid sleeps like the dead. His mother could sleep through a fire alarm too." He got the second chair. "Coffee? It's instant." Yes. They sat down at a kitchen table under a lamp with no shade and turned to tab 41. "Read it to me," Corinne said. "I've read it 9 times today and I need to hear a person say it." The 11 acres north of Building 3 came into the company in 1961 when Walt bought the whole parcel off the Bessemer in Lake Erie, Owen said. Rail service ended in 84. But service and easement are 2 different animals, and nobody at the railroad ever filed to vacate, and nobody at Ashby ever asked them to, and there's a quitclaim in 981 that transfers the railroad's remaining interest to the property owner. That's you. He turned the page. So you own 11 acres of rail-served industrial ground with the spur already in place and the crossing agreement already recorded, and there are 4 parcels like it left in this county, and 3 of them are owned by people who will never sell. And the well. The 1963 deep well permit is appurtenant to the land, Owen said. Not to the business. Pennsylvania stopped issuing that class in 89. It goes with the dirt, forever, and it draws 400,000 gallons a day. Corinne put both hands around the coffee. "Rail and water," she said. "Rail and water," Owen said. "That's not a laundry. Sitting next to each other on 11 acres inside a city, that's the only thing of its kind between here and Ashtabula. And it is not on anybody's tax card as anything but weeds, because it hasn't moved since Kennedy." He turned the page one more time. "And on the 14th of March, he said, 11 days before Cardinal Asset Partners bought your note at 71 cents, an entity called Cardinal Bayfront Holdings took a 24-month purchase option on the Krysiak parcel. That's the 8 acres directly north of your fence." Corinne Ashby set her coffee down. "He wants the dirt," she said. "He wants the dirt. He's wanted the dirt since March." Owen sat back. "He is not buying a laundry with a rail spur behind it. He's buying a rail spur with a laundry in the way, and everything he said in that conference room about consolidation and headcount was true, and none of it was the reason. And the reason he said the true parts is that men believe you when you tell them the bad news yourself." 22 days. 22 days. "And you're not on the engagement?" "No, ma'am." "Then why?" said Corinne. "Are you sitting at this table at 10 o'clock at night with your reading glasses on?" Owen took them off, embarrassed. He'd forgotten he had them. Because I said it wasn't a favor, he said. The ring. I said there wasn't anything attached to it, and I meant it. And if I take $1 off you between now and the 22nd, then it turns out there was. And Grieve gets to be right about me in the paper. He shrugged slightly. So no dollars. But nobody said anything about a kitchen table. Corinne looked at him for a long moment. That is the most stubborn thing I have ever heard a person say. Yes, ma'am. Theo got up at 11:15 for water. Because he always got up at 11:15 for water. And stopped in the kitchen doorway in his dinosaur shirt with his cowlick standing straight up. He looked at the woman at the table. Are you the sad lady? Theo, it's a question, Dad. Corinne turned around in her chair. I'm Corinne, she said. Are you sad though? Yes. Theo came over and got his water and drank about a third of it and stood there with the glass in both hands considering her over the rim in the way of a person who has all night. Is that his ring? Owen said Bud, but the boy was pointing, and Owen looked, and there it was, on a chain, out over her collar for once, instead of under it, because she'd been leaning forward over the folder for an hour. Yes, Corinne said, it was my husband's. Why's it on your neck? Theo, that's enough. It's all right. She said it without looking away from the boy. It's on my neck because it isn't mine to wear. Theo's face did something complicated. You can't give somebody back, he said. The kitchen went very quiet. My mom left, he said. He said it the way children say the enormous things, standing flat-footed in the middle of the room with a glass of water in both hands. She's not coming back, Dad said. And I asked if I was still hers, and Dad said yes. Always, he said you can't give somebody back after. Even if they go, he drank the rest of his water. So you're still his, Theo said. It's just a ring, though. You should put it on your hand, because if it's on your neck, it can fall off in the sink. Then he said, Can I have another one? And Owen filled the glass and walked him back down the hall, and when he came out 4 minutes later, Corinne Ashby was sitting exactly where he'd left her, with her hand flat over her mouth, and she took it away and said, in a wrecked voice, How old is he? 6, yeah, Owen, she said. How does a 6-year-old... Because nobody's told him yet how to say it sideways, Owen said. Give it 4 years. They all learn. She sat there. Then she reached back and unhooked the chain and slid the ring off it and looked at it in her palm the way she had in the lobby and put it on her right hand, not her left. Her right third finger, where it was too big and turned loose, and she closed her fist around it and held it there like it might go somewhere. It'll want sizing, Owen said quietly. It'll want to be worn, she said. Then she pulled the folder over and said, All right, 22 days. What do we do? And that is how it started. At a kitchen table on Wallace Street with a lamp with no shade. In a house with 11 boxes against the wall. They did 4 things, and they did them in 22 days, and none of them was clever. That is the part people always want to be different. They want the story where somebody finds the loophole. There wasn't a loophole. There was a woman who had been holding a company shut with both hands for 26 months. And there was a man who knew what things were worth. And there were 11 other people who stayed late. And that was the entire arsenal. First, they got the number verified by somebody who was not Owen Marsh. Peter Ashby paid for it. He came to the plant on the second morning without calling and stood in the doorway of the glass office and said, I found a firm in Pittsburgh. Kestrel, no enforcement history, no Erie connections. They've done 4 hospital systems. He put a page on the desk. 31,000. It's my money, it's not the company's, and I don't want it back. Corinne said, Peter, don't. He was looking at the floor. I read tab 41. He rubbed the back of his neck. Nate used to walk out there. Did you know that? On Sundays when he came in. He'd walk the fence line up along the spur. I thought he was smoking again. He was. Yeah, well, Peter's voice went. I'd like it if the 11 acres turned out to be worth something. That's all. I'd like that quite a bit. Kestrel took 11 days and came back within 2% of Owen's number on the operating assets and 11% above him on the north parcel. Because Owen had priced it as industrial land, and Kestrel had priced it with the well permit as an entitlement, which Owen said out loud at the table was a better call than his and that he should have seen it. Second, they went and found the buyer, not a broker. Corinne Ashby got in her car. Bayline Rail and Terminal was a short-line operator out of Connaught that had lost the Chrysiac parcel to a Delaware entity in March and had been looking for rail-served ground on that side of the bay for 6 years. Their president was a woman named Faye Okonkwo, who had started as a conductor in 1994, and Corinne drove out there on a Thursday with the deed book, the quitclaim, the crossing agreement, and the well permit in a banker's box, and put them on the table in that order without saying a word first. Faye Okonkwo read for 19 minutes. Then she said, "Who else knows the easement never got vacated? 3 people in this state. Is one of them Cardinal?" "I believe he's known since March," Corinne said. "And I believe he's been very careful never to say the word out loud in a room with me in it." Faye Okonkwo laughed once, without much humor. "Yeah," she said. "That's him." Bayline signed a letter of intent on the 9th day for the North 11 acres subject to survey at a number Owen had to read twice. $3,180,000. For weeds. Third, and this was the one nobody outside that building understood, then or since they started the return line. Because clearing a note is not a company. Corinne said that on the 4th night, flatly, at the kitchen table, and she was right, and it changed everything that came after. If we sell the north end and pay Cardinal off, we are a laundry with 140 people and no hospital contract, and a competitor in Columbus that undercuts us by 9% on price forever, she said. That's not a rescue. That's a stay of execution, and everybody in that plant will know it by Christmas. So what do you want? I want the hospital back, and I am not going to get it on price. Ruthann Pike is the reason there is a return line, and Owen has said so publicly every time anybody has asked him since. He'd gone out to the plant on the 5th night, not on the clock, not on the engagement, just a man walking into a building where nobody had ever asked him for his badge, and he'd found her in the sewing room at 7 at night with the fan he'd bought running. Mending isolation gowns. You're supposed to throw those out, Owen said. They're supposed to throw them out, Ruthann said. The hospital. They throw out 400 of these a day. Blue plastic paper gowns, one use, in the bag, gone, and then they buy 400 more from a truck out of Georgia. She snapped a thread. We used to wash their gowns, cloth ones, till 98. Owen sat down on a stool. Why'd it stop? Because disposable got cheap, Ruthann said. And then it got expensive again, and nobody at that hospital's been in this job long enough to remember the first part. Owen sat there. Ruthann, he said, how many people in this building can sew to spec? 11. 14 if you count Alma's girls. Could you make one? Make what? A surgical gown. Reusable barrier fabric, taped seams, 100 wash cycles, certified. Ruthann Pike looked at him over her glasses. Son, she said, I made them for 19 years. They costed it in 4 nights. A disposable isolation gown ran the hospital system between 58 cents and $1.10 depending on the class, times roughly $9,000 a week. Plus, regulated waste disposal at a number the hospital's own sustainability office had been complaining about in public for 2 years. A reusable gown cost $11 to make and could be laundered 120 times, at Ashby's cost of about 31 cents a turn, with a deep well and a boiler house nobody else in the county had. Owen ran it 11 ways. It came out the same 11 times. Over 5 years on gowns alone, it saved the hospital system $1,400,000 and took 9 tons of regulated waste out of their stream. And it put the sewing room at Ashby Linen and Laundry to work 6 days a week for the first time since 1998. Corinne got a meeting on the 15th day. Not with purchasing. With the chief operating officer of the hospital system, a man named Aziz Haddad, who had been in the room on the 9th of June 2 years earlier when a woman whose husband had been dead for 48 hours stood up and gave his presentation. He gave her 20 minutes, He took 40. He did not sign a contract, because chief operating officers do not sign contracts in 40 minutes. What he signed was a 2-page letter of intent for a 90-day pilot on 2 surgical floors, contingent on certification, dated the 19th of September. 3 days before the creditors' meeting. Ruth Ann named it. They were standing in the sewing room looking at the first one, the sample, made by hand, on a dress form, blue as a lake in March. And Lorna Whitfield from accounting said they'd need a name for the line on the invoice, and everybody threw out something terrible, and Ruth Ann Pike said, without looking up from the seam she was checking, call it the return line. That's what it is. It goes out, it comes back, it goes out again. Nobody argued. Certification was the thing that should have been impossible. And the reason it wasn't is that 140 people found out. Nobody announced it. Corinne had decided not to, she said, at the kitchen table, that she was not going to stand in that lobby again and give people hope she couldn't guarantee, and Owen said that was the first thing she'd said in 6 weeks that he thought was wrong, and she said she'd noted his objection. They found out anyway, because Ruth Ann Pike told Alma, and Alma told her sister on second shift, and by Thursday of that week 11 women were staying past 6 in the sewing room, off the clock, and by the following Monday there were 19. Corinne came down and told them to go home and put it in writing that she'd told them. Ruth Ann said, put it in writing then, and did not move, and neither did anybody else, and that was the end of that conversation, and everybody in the room knew it. The barrier fabric had to come from a mill in North Carolina, and the sample lot was $4,000, which Lorna found by not paying the packaging supplier for a month, with the packaging supplier's knowledge and written consent, which Corinne insisted on getting in advance, and which took her a phone call and 11 minutes of her pride. The testing lab was in Chicago. Liquid barrier, seam strength, wash durability, 120 cycles simulated, then retest. 21 days standard, Owen drove the samples out himself on a Saturday, 9 hours each way, with Theo in the back seat and a cooler of sandwiches. And the boy asked 200 questions and slept through Ohio, and Owen got back at 2 in the morning on Sunday and was at the plant at 6. The lab came back in 14 days instead of 21, because the woman who ran it had a brother who was a rigger, or a nurse, or something. Owen never got the story straight. And because Corinne had called her personally and told her the truth about the September 30th date instead of inventing a reason. That is a thing worth stopping on for a second, because it happened 4 separate times in those 22 days, and Owen noticed it every time. She told people the truth, including the parts that made her look bad, and people moved for her. Not everybody. Not the nursing home group in Medville. Not the underwriter. But Gus Petrakis stood up and left a room and came back. Faye Okonkwo held a deal open out of sentiment and said so out loud. A lab in Chicago pulled a sample lot forward by a week. A 71-year-old man in Rochester went into a drawer for a pattern he hadn't touched since 2009. Owen had spent 9 years appraising estates and 2 years behind a pawn counter, and he had built an entire working theory of human beings out of it. And that theory was that everybody is protecting something and everybody shades it. 22 days at Ashby Linen and Laundry took that theory apart. The fourth thing they did was the hardest and the least dramatic, and it was Corinne's, entirely. And Owen had nothing to do with it. She went and saw every creditor in person. Not the committee, the people. The pension trustee in Harrisburg, 4 hours each way in 1 day. The chemical supplier in Cleveland they owed $111,000 to, whose owner she had not been able to look in the face for a year. Ken Ottaway at Erie first, in his office with his door open. She took the Kestrel valuation, the Bayline letter, and the Haddad letter, and she put them on the table in that order, and then, every time, all 6 times, she said the same thing first, before any of it. She said, I want to start by telling you what I did with my husband's wedding ring, because you're going to read it in a paper, and I would rather you heard it from me across a table. Owen was not in any of those rooms. He heard about them later, in pieces, from Lorna and from Ken Ottaway's assistant, and once from Faye Okonkwo, who had heard it third hand in a bar in Conneaut, and did not know Owen was connected to it. The version Faye heard ended with the chemical supplier in Cleveland, a 70-year-old man named Gus Petrakis, standing up in the middle of it and leaving the room and coming back 4 minutes later and saying he'd take 50 cents on the dollar over 3 years and he'd keep shipping in the meantime. That is not a thing that happens. That happened. It nearly died on the 16th day, over a creek that had not existed since 1974. Bayline's title company kicked the deal on a Tuesday morning. The 1961 legal description for the North 11 acres ran the western boundary along the east bank of Kerr Run. And Kerr Run had been culverted and buried by the city in the 70s when they put Ivy Street through, and there was now no east bank of anything, and a modern surveyor could not tie the description to a single monument he could stand on, which meant the parcel could not be conveyed, which meant $3,180,000 became a lawsuit that would take 2 years, and the forbearance ran out in 14 days. Faye Okonkwo called it a 1960s problem and said Bayline had walked away from 2 deals over exactly this, and gave them until Friday, out of what she was honest enough to call sentiment. Corinne called the company's lawyer, who said quiet title action, 18 to 24 months. Owen said, "Where's Walt's stuff?" "What?" "Walt Ashby, 1961. He bought that parcel off a railroad, which means a railroad surveyor set monuments and drew a plat. And railroads keep everything, and men who build a plant in 1961 keep everything twice. He was already standing. Where's his stuff? It was in the boiler house. Second floor, over the offices, in 11 steel cabinets that nobody had opened since 2009, in a room that had a window unit in it and no reason to exist, and Desmond Kroom stood in the doorway and would not come in, and Corinne put her hand on his arm for a second and then went in without him. They were up there for 9 hours. Owen found it at 4:40 in the morning in the 4th cabinet, a linen-backed plat, 30 by 40 inches, drawn by the Bessemer and Lake Erie's engineering department in March of 1961, showing every monument, every iron pin, and, because railroad surveyors were railroad surveyors, a full tie from the western boundary to 2 permanent references that were not the creek. One was the center line of the spur, which was still out there in the weeds. The other was a granite section marker at the corner of Ivy and Chrysiac that the city had built a sidewalk around in 1988, and that was, at that moment, holding up a mailbox. Corinne Ashby sat down on the floor of the boiler house attic at 4:40 in the morning and laughed until she couldn't breathe, and then cried, and then laughed again, which Owen understood to be the correct sequence. The surveyor tied it in 6 hours on the Thursday. The title company cleared it Friday at 2. And in the last cabinet, and a flat file with the plat, there was a photograph nobody had ever seen. Walt Ashby in 1961, 31 years old, standing on bare dirt with a rolled-up drawing under his arm and 1 foot on the rail, grinning like a man who has just done something insane with borrowed money. Corinne had it framed and hung it in the lobby before the creditors' meeting at the end of the row and did not tell anybody she'd done it. Ruthann noticed on the Monday morning. Of course she did. On the 20th night, 3 days out, Owen was at the kitchen table on Wallace Street at 1 in the morning building the schedule of assets, and Corinne was asleep in the second chair with her head down on her arms, which she had not meant to do. Theo came out at 11:15 for water, saw her, stopped and went and got the blanket off his own bed and put it over her and went back to bed without saying a word about it. Owen watched him do the whole thing from 4 feet away and did not get up. In the morning she woke at 5 and was mortified. "I fell asleep in your house." "You did. I have never done that in my life." "That tracks," Owen said, and put coffee in front of her. She looked at the blanket, which had dinosaurs on it. "Who?" she said. "He did it himself, around midnight. Didn't say anything about it either, which is not like him, so I think it was a serious operation." Corinne Ashby sat there holding a dinosaur blanket in a kitchen in a rented house at 5 in the morning, with 3 days to go. "Owen," she said, "what is this?" He knew exactly what she meant, and he did not pretend otherwise. "I don't know," he said. I've been not thinking about it on purpose for about 4 weeks. That's an answer. It's the honest one. He sat down across from her. Here's what I know. I'm a man with a lease, a truck with 190,000 miles on it, and a job at a pawn shop that Sal's holding for me out of pity. You're a woman who's going to be in a room on Monday deciding the future of 140 people. Anything either of us says about it before Monday is a thing we're saying to get through Monday. And after Monday? After Monday, you'll either have a company or you won't, Owen said, and I'll still be a man with a lease and a truck. Nothing about me changes on Monday. That's the part I'd want you to know. Corinne looked down at her right hand, where the ring sat, loose, turned so the join was against her palm. He was never back by 6, she said again quietly. No, ma'am. I want to be the kind of person who says a thing on Friday instead of waiting for Sunday. I've had 26 months to think about that, and I still can't do it. Owen reached over and put his hand flat on the table, palm down next to hers, not touching. Then say it Tuesday, he said. I'm not going anywhere Tuesday. She put her hand on top of his. That was all. 2 people at a kitchen table at 5 in the morning with a dinosaur blanket and 11 cardboard boxes against the wall, and neither of them said one more word about it. And 3 days later she walked into a room and took Hollis Grieve apart with a survey map and a letter from a hospital. The creditors' meeting was held on Monday the 22nd at 9 in the morning in the conference room at Ashby Linen and Laundry, because Corinne Ashby had refused 4 times to hold it at a law office downtown. She wanted them in the building. She wanted them to hear the plant through the wall. 9 people at the table. Hollis Grieve and his counsel for Cardinal. Ken Ottaway for Erie First's remaining participation. The pension trustee's lawyer, in by video, on a screen at the end. Gus Petrakis, who had driven from Cleveland at 5 in the morning and would not sit until Corinne sat. A woman from the packaging supplier. Peter Ashby. Lorna Whitfield with 4 binders. And a man from Kestrel in Pittsburgh with his own copy of his own report. Owen Marsh sat against the wall by the door because he had told her 4 separate times that he should not come at all. You'll be in the room, Corinne had said. Ma'am, my name in that room is a gift to Cardinal. You'll be in the room, she said, and I'm going to say who you are out loud in the first 90 seconds, because I have learned exactly one thing in 26 months, and it is that everything I hid got used against me, and everything I said out loud stopped being a weapon the second it left my mouth. So he sat against the wall. And she did it in the first 90 seconds. Before we start, Corinne said, 2 disclosures. The man by the door is Owen Marsh. He prepared the initial asset inventory this committee received in July. He was the whistleblower in the Corliss and Bain matter, which is a matter of public record and which took me 11 minutes to confirm, and I would encourage anyone who has not spent 11 minutes on it to do so before this meeting ends. He has been off this company's payroll since the 18th of July and has not been compensated in any form since, at his insistence, over my objection. She let that sit for a second. Second disclosure. Last October, I pawned my late husband's wedding ring for $340 to close a payroll shortfall. I did not disclose it to my board, my brother-in-law, or my mother-in-law. Mr. Marsh is the man who wrote that ticket, and 11 months later he bought the ring out of the case with his own money and returned it to me, in my lobby, in front of my staff, and asked for nothing. If any person at this table believes those facts disqualify either of us, say so now and I will address it before we look at a single number. Nobody said anything. Gus Petrakis said, "Sit down, Corinne." She sat down. Then she went to work. She did not argue. That is the thing Owen remembered about the whole 90 minutes. She never once argued with Hollis Grieve. She just put paper on the table. The Kestrel valuation, independent, unaffiliated, $31,000 of Peter Ashby's own money, which he said out loud too. The Bayline Rail and Terminal letter of intent on the north parcel. $3,180,000, subject to survey, 60-day close. The proceeds waterfall Lorna had built, Cardinal's note retired in full, at par plus accrued interest and reasonable fees within 45 days of close. Petrakis at 50 cents over 3 years, per his own signed term. The packaging supplier in full. The pension current by December. The Haddad letter, the 90-day pilot, 2 surgical floors, dated 3 days earlier. And Ruth Ann Pike's gown, folded in a clear bag, which she put in the middle of the table and did not explain until somebody asked. Greaves' counsel spoke first, and he was good. He said the note had matured into default in the 4th quarter, that the forbearance was an accommodation and not a right, that Cardinal's proposal remained on the table with the guarantees released, and that a letter of intent subject to survey from a short-line railroad was not, with respect, money. It isn't money, Corinne agreed. It's a buyer. Cardinal doesn't have one of those. Cardinal is prepared to, the note is prepayable at par, she said. Section 4.2. There's no call protection, no make whole, and no consent right on a sale of unencumbered real property outside the collateral pool, which the North 11 acres is. Because Erie first never took it in 2016. Ken, you told me why once. Ken Ottaway cleared his throat. We didn't take it because Walt's survey was from 1961, and the legal description had a creek in it that isn't there anymore. It wasn't worth the title work. It wasn't worth the title work, Corinne repeated. She let that hang for exactly as long as it needed to hang. Then she said, one more item for the committee, and I want to be very careful about how I say it, because I'm not alleging anything improper, and I don't intend to. She slid a single page down the table. On the 14th of March, an entity called Cardinal Bayfront Holdings took a 24-month purchase option on the Krysiak parcel, which is the 8 acres immediately north of our fence line. Cardinal Asset Partners acquired our note 11 days later. She folded her hands. I'm not asking Mr. Grieve to explain that. It's a matter of county record and he's under no obligation to me. I'm putting it in front of the committee because this committee has been asked for 11 weeks to accept Cardinal's view of what our real estate is worth, and I've decided I'm finished learning things 11 months late. Hollis Grieve did not move. The pension trustee's lawyer, on the screen at the end of the table, said, I'm sorry, could someone repeat the date on that option? The room turned. That was the whole thing. There was no shouting and nobody slammed anything, and Grieve never lost his composure for 1 second, and Owen, sitting against the wall, watched a man lose 11 months of work in about 4 seconds of silence. They took a break at 10:40. Grieve came over to the wall where Owen was standing. That was you. That was the county recorder's office, Owen said. $19. Grieve almost smiled. It's a good business, he said, what I do. I want you to understand that I've never taken a company that wasn't already going down. Not once. I believe you. But you found the dirt in 6 weeks, and I've been at this 22 years, and I want to know how, because that eases my mind, and I'd like my mind eased. Owen thought about it. You looked at what it does, he said. I looked at what it is. Cardinal accepted payoff at par. They had no choice, and Grieve knew it before the break ended. And to his credit, he did not spend the second half of that meeting making everybody watch. He said Cardinal would take the payoff, that the forbearance would extend through the Bayline close, and that he wished the company well, and he said it in a way that was not sarcastic. On his way out, he stopped at the door and looked back at the plant through the glass, at the tunnel washers going, at the steam, at the flatwork ironers with the sheets coming off them in long white sheets like something being born. 61 people would have kept their jobs, he said. 140 are keeping them, said Corinne Ashby. Yes, Grieve said. Today then he left, and the note was retired 61 days later, and Cardinal Bayfront Holdings let its option on the Krysiak parcel lapse in the spring, and Bayline bought that too. The room emptied at 11:30. Lorna cried in the hallway and denied it. Peter Ashby shook Owen's hand, a real one, both of them knowing exactly what had been said and unsaid in July, and drove to Cochrane Street to tell his mother. Ruth Ann Pike's gown was still on the table in its bag. Corinne came back in and shut the door and stood there for a second with her back against it, and Owen said, You want to sit down? No, she said. I want to give you something, and then I want to sit down. Because I've been carrying it in my bag for 9 days, and I keep finding reasons. She took a small box out of her bag. It was a jewelry box, but not a nice one. A cheap black hinged one, the kind that comes off a shelf behind a counter. Owen looked at it and did not take it. Ma'am. Open it. He opened it. It was a plain band, 14 karat, 5 millimeters, no engraving inside, wear on the palm side. Owen Marsh stood in a conference room with 140 people's jobs saved on the table behind him and could not make a sound. You said 2 towns over, Corinne said. You said $190, and you said 9 months after she left. So I had a date to within about 3 weeks. I called your Mr. Merrick in August and asked him how a person would go about it. And he told me 11 shops, and he made 9 of the calls himself because he said I'd get lied to and he wouldn't. Sal, Owen said. A place in Girard had it in a scrap lot. It was going out to the refiner on the Friday. Her voice was completely level, and her eyes were not. 4 days, Owen. It was 4 days. He couldn't look up from the box. What did it cost? It's paid, Corinne said. Corinne, nobody's owed anything on it, she said, and there's no favor in it, and there isn't anything attached to it, and I'm going to be around after today, so you'll have to find another way to argue with me about it. Owen put his hand over his mouth. That band was worth $190, he said. No, said Corinne Ashby. That's what it weighed. She took it out of the box herself, and he gave her his hand, and she put it on his finger, right hand, third finger, same as hers, because neither of them was ready to say anything about the other one, and both of them knew exactly what they were not saying. It fit. It had always fit. Underneath them, through the floor, the plant kept running. The Bayline sale closed in November. The note was retired on the 3rd of December, 5 weeks before the forbearance would have run out. And Lorna Whitfield printed the wire confirmation and taped it to the door of the payroll office, and it stayed there for 2 years until somebody painted. The return line was certified in February, and the pilot went 90 days, and then it went to 4 floors, and then it went to the whole system. And by the 2nd year, Ashby Linen and Laundry was making surgical textiles for 3 hospital networks in 2 states out of a sewing room that had been down to 11 people and was now 34. Ruth Ann Pike did not retire. She took a title instead. She made them put it on a card and spent 4 years training everybody who came through that door, and when she finally did go, at 66. The company gave her the first gown, the handmade one off the dress form, framed, and she hung it in her front room where a person would ordinarily hang a picture of a grandchild. And she had 11 of those too, and she hung it anyway. Desmond Croom still would not walk through the boiler house door without stopping. Some things do not get fixed. He put a bench outside it, though, and men ate their lunch there, and after a while, it was just where the bench was. Peter Ashby joined the board and was a difficult director and was right about 4 important things in 6 years. Sal Merrick never took $1 for the 9 phone calls and would not discuss it, and when Lakeshore Loan and Trade closed in the 5th year because Sal's knees gave out, there was a job waiting for him that he pretended to be insulted by for about a week. Hollis Grieve sent a card at Christmas. Just the one. It said, "You were right about the dirt," and it was signed with his initials. And Corinne kept it in a drawer, and Owen never entirely understood why and never asked. And this was not a rescue. That has to be said plainly, because the version that gets told in the plant has gotten smoother every year, and smooth is the enemy of true. Nobody was saved here. A man from a pawnshop did not save a company. 140 people and a woman who would not put it down saved a company over 22 days with a survey map and a letter from a hospital and a chemical supplier from Cleveland who stood up and left the room and came back. And nobody gave anybody back the years. Nate Ashby is still dead at 41. Danielle is still gone. The 11 months that Ring sat in a case are gone. And so are the 2 years Owen Marsh spent behind a counter watching people bring in the last thing they had and there is no ending anywhere that returns those. What happened was smaller than a rescue, and it is available to almost anybody. A man looked at a thing everybody else had already priced and disagreed. That's all. That's the whole of it. $495 against $80 a month, because there were 4 words inside it. 11 acres of weeds on a tax card, because service and easement are 2 different animals. A room full of women who could sew to spec in a county that had decided a laundry was a laundry. A ring in a scrap lot in Girard, 4 days from the refiner, that a woman with 22 days to save a company spent 9 of them chasing. People will tell you that value is what the market says. It isn't. Price is what the market says. Value is what a thing actually is, and the whole trick, the entire trick, the only one, is to be the person who goes and looks at the underside. Most people won't. It takes longer and it makes you strange at parties. But every so often somebody does it for a person instead of a piece of property, and that is what love mostly is, in the end, once you take off everything that was sold to you about it. It is one person refusing to accept the number that everybody else has written on you. There is a wall of photographs in a lobby on Ivy Street in Erie, Pennsylvania, going back to 1961. There's a newer one down at the end now. It's a bad photograph, somebody's phone, bad light, taken on a Saturday. It shows a woman in a hard hat and a man in a gray shirt and a boy of about 8 standing on the counting table with a paper hat on, running the tape. And all 3 of them are laughing at something that happened just outside the frame and is not recorded anywhere. If you look closely, you can see that both adults are wearing plain gold bands, left hands, by then. Nobody in that building will tell you the story of the rings. They will tell you the company had a bad year once and came through it. They will tell you about the return line and the 11 acres, and the year the sewing room went to 34 people. Ask about the rings, and they get quiet and change the subject, every time, all of them, for years. It's not a secret. It's just theirs.